Okay.
So we're trying a slightly different configuration here.
Is this your afternoon table?
What?
It's your afternoon table.
It is, honestly.
But
I'll just ignore me.
so if you'd like to get started, we're all
Okay.
set.
Good afternoon, Danielle Fitzko, Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation.
I'm Ansley Bloomer. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration for Forest Parks and Recreation.
So we're gonna do budget. So, and no pretty pictures, unfortunately, lots of numbers. And so what I want to do is just remind everybody sort of the context of like what FPR is, give you sort of a little organizational so you understand where the money's going. In Forest Parks and Recreation, we have 4 divisions. We have our forestry division, that really overall it is meant to keep forests healthy, intact, productive, sustainably managed. And we have several program areas. We have our state lands team. We have, across the Agency of Natural Resources, 360,000 acres. We have our private lands team. Our county foresters' main job is to work with the use value appraisal, forest land category. We have an urban forestry program, downtowns, greening the gray. We have a watershed forestry program that really looks at protecting water quality during forestry operations. Forest economy, really supporting businesses across the whole supply chain. Forest health monitors for the health and well-being of our forests. And then we have a wildland fire small program, prevention, and then, response. And so that's the forestry team. It's the largest division of full-time staff, at about 46 maybe staff in that division. Then we have a Vermont State Parks. It's the 100-year anniversary. I'll go into a little bit more of that. 56 parks around the state, generally around 1 million visitors per year. It's really like a municipality. We, on a busy weekend, 40 to 50,000 people can be in state parks across the state. $280 million in infrastructure assets, from buildings to wastewater pipes. And then we have the Division of Land Administration and Recreation, and they really have 3 areas. They have conservation, so we have a conservation arm where we either we're expanding our portfolio for state lands, or we have easements on private land. We have lands administration, which is like land records, leases, licenses, and SUPs, little survey team. And then we have a very small recreation team of 3 people, which includes the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative. There's 1 person for that. And then we have a grant. They do a lot of grants. A lot of money goes through that shop. And then our last division is Ainsley's team, which is really the circulatory system of the department, because they touch everything. It's the business office. It's small, but it is insane the amount of work that they do. Because you can imagine Vermont State Parks being a business of thousands of invoices every year. We have a $60 million portfolio of grants, 300 projects underneath those grants every year, contracts for services and commodities. So quite a bit that goes on in our business office. This slide here, I'm going to go into this slide here gives you a beat on where the money goes. Our overall budget for FPR is this year proposed in the governor's budget, $47 million. Of that, 6% goes to the admin, 22% goes to forestry, 40% to parks, and then 31% goes to the Division of Lands Administration and Recreation. I'm sorry, I can't make this more fun. So I'm trying. We'll get better when we get to other things. So revenue sources were 30% general funds, 20% federal funds, and 42% is parks special funds. If we think about parks and their budget's about $18 million. 75% of parks budget comes from revenue that they bring in. Gate fees, boat sales, concessions stands, firewood sales. And really, if we're looking at parks, that's only 600,000 general funds. It's really mostly raised from their work. And then our relationship with 7 ski resorts. We get funding about $3 million, $3.5 million.
That's state land. It's
state lands that we have agreements with ski resorts, and we get a percentage of their sales for tickets. And we look at that as a relationship where that helps to buy down sort of the cost for Vermonters accessing Vermont state parks. In forestry, it's mostly personnel. It's 80% of our budget's personnel. We have no levers to pull to bring money in besides like going after federal grant dollars. There's like no fee raising or revenue sources that we have. We do a good job of trying to bring in federal grants, which then puts stress on your team. Again, parks is mostly money that they bring in and $600,000 of general funds. DLAR, which again, Lands Administration and Recreation. They're a small team, only 14 people, but they have a budget of 14 million, and that's mostly passed through. They pass through about $11 million in grants, whether it's for land conservation or for recreation. So that's why it's so big. I guess that's sort of all that slide.
John,
Just a quick question. Yeah. Do you have any law enforcement officers when we're talking about timber trespass? There's nobody there, like a game warden, right?
No, that's from Fish and Wildlife. We do have enforcement authority for heavy cut violations and AMP violations. And then we have a relationship with Department of Environmental Conservation, the environmental enforcement officers. But they don't have law enforcement ability either. There is though with Fish and Wildlife game wardens.
So when you work on a heavy cut, you have to work with the AG's office then?
We work with DEC for enforcement, and then if we need to, we can elevate it to the AG's office. But there are times when we rely heavily on Fish and Wildlife to go out with us for a dangerous situation. They're absolutely our partners. And sometimes we've had to do that.
So I'll touch a little bit more on the budget. As you mentioned, the budget's just north of 47 million. Of that increase, which is an increase, I'm sorry, of 12.3 million. Of that increase, it's around 796,000, that's general fund. The general fund increase is primarily comprised of the increased costs associated with benefits. I'm sure you've heard this, which is roughly $753,000, of which 450,000 is health benefits alone. Other general fund increases are due to overhead and fixed costs, inflation, and folks that were hired into range. Our federal funds are an increase of about 8.8 million, primarily due to the upcoming land acquisition of 2 land parcels, which I know you're going to talk about here in a minute. And then, which is to the tune of about 7.3 million. Other federal increases include associated costs with those 2 land acquisitions, and then subrecipient grants funded through the Land, Water, and Conservation Fund dollars. Our special funds, and specifically the Park Special Fund, have increased by 2.5 million. Again, really largely due to staff costs, the associated costs with those benefits, and then also it's been another year with a lot of inflation, and then also, unfortunately, we found spread of EAB Emerald Ash Borer at 5 new parks this year. So that's an added cost. We do have, this is fun. We have budgeted for the expected costs associated with the 100th anniversary for the Vermont State Parks. That's the fun thing we've got in here, but that's great news. But we're really feeling a pinch everywhere in our budget. We covered our upward pressures where we could, but it was definitely leaving a big impact, and we're going to feel it in FY25.
I think I got the next few. So key changes that you'll see, like we absorbed most of we can, but Vermont State Parks, as Ansley mentioned, we're having a $2.5 million increase. Luckily, we have enough money in a park special fund to meet that. $1.1 million of that is really just staffing. We bring on over 450 staff in the summertime to manage state parks. So you can imagine that the staff increase when we have health increase costs go up. Well, they're temporary, but overall, it goes up. We also had an increase of about $600,000 in contracting with everything from firewood to ice to toilet paper. It's just going up. So we just have to meet those inflation numbers. Another area that's happening for Vermont State Parks is we're getting some really high demand on recreations on some like hotspots, like think about the south end of Willoughby or Smuggler's Notch, where we have a lot of people coming. So we need people management. So we need staff present. Maybe we need porta potties because we have a lot of people there. It's outside of fee-based areas, but our staff in state parks really have the expertise in people management. So they are expanding to sort of meet that staffing and service pressure there. So they this year absorbed over $100,000 in just staffing up and bringing porta potties to Willoughby South End. And that's just a reality.
Is there ever a conversation about when you see something like that, so making it a fee-based area to make up for those costs?
Well, there's a potential for that down the road, but that's a big shift for some communities. And particularly in the south end of Willoughby, when we went for the modernization that's happened there, they really specifically asked us not to make it a state park. But I'll share with you in a little bit, we did a parks modernization study, and we're trying to figure out how to raise funds because it's expanding services. There's a potential to do like kiosks at places like that, like for donate, hey, donate, because we just accessed this place that you loved and enjoyed. So we're trying to think of other ways, but eventually if it gets so much, we probably would have to think about making those areas paid.
And do you ever do like, so if the community didn't want it to, I imagine that's because they want access. So I know like I live in Dorset residents don't pay for access to Emerald Lake State Park. Are there things like that that can sort of mitigate the community?
Yeah, our goal long-term at Vermont State Parks is to make day use area free for all the monitors. I mean, that would be ideal. We have a relationship with the Vermont Parks Forever, and that's what they're trying to do for us. Hopefully we'll get there, but right now we're not just yet, but that would be ideal.
Are Shaftesbury residents able to get?
I was surprised when I heard this. So I told them the town may be paying. The town pays.
Yeah, I was just suggesting it as a way that you could potentially
You could
have a new fee for an area, but not have that fee be, not
Yeah.
charge, people who live in the town that
Right, yeah.
they can continue to access.
Yeah.
But that's like that.
We have ideas for how to raise funds in the future. Even like one of the ideas we've been thinking about, like we just had DMV price increases, but hey, opt in to get, or opt out to not be, not get a Vermont State Parks Pass for the year. $10.
Jed,
Is the south end of Willoughby where the Willow Vale is, the Willow Vale Inn? Where if you're coming from Barton or Crystal Lake, is it the far end or?
It's by, no, it's in Wells. Well,
that's,
not Wells,
That might say that.
Westford.
Yeah,
Westford.
it's in West.
See, like where you go to hike Pisgah, like,
Yeah.
and it's at that end.
South end.
The south end.
It's the new.
I
I guess-
actually don't get on the ground as much as I need to.
The mountains are so steep on either side of Willoughby, you can't ever see where the sun's setting. or rising.
And Great Peregrine Falcon.
Okay.
Another thing that's happening in Vermont State Park, have anyone been to Burton Island? This is an island on Lake Champlain. We have 3 state parks up there. You got Burton Island, which is one of our most popular state parks. We get about 17,000 visitors a year. We also have Woods Island and Night Point. In order to access those parks, you need boat, and Burton Island in particular, if you need to bring firewood or we have to pump septic systems, garbage needs to come off, any infrastructure improvements, you need to get construction materials and equipment out there. Our boat died a couple of years ago. We've been working with a contractor and it's kind of been a little iffy. So we're making a huge investment in a $1.2 million landing craft so we can get people, equipment out there, garbage off, firewood in. Ideally, we don't like to fund this type of stuff through our state parks operating money, but we really need it, and we have some money this year to be able to do that. So that's one big item in our budget.
Any pictures of that?
I could send them to you.
John?
About the boat this year.
Related to that, do the state parks own vehicles, lawnmowers, that sort of thing?
Yes, yeah. And we're actually in the process of building renovating two parks maintenance facilities. So the whole operation behind the scenes at Vermont State Parks is huge. I mean, like I said, $280 million in assets. It's like just behind BGS. And people don't think about it because it's dispersed, it's in remote areas. But all the lawnmowers and all the equipment that's needed, vehicles, it's a lot. And just the repair and maintenance on 2,200 lean-tos. Camps, cabins. We talk a lot about toilets because we have toilet buildings and all that stuff. Whole huge capital construction that goes on in parks. We also have, it's in our budget this year, and this is really just us doing a better job of forecasting when we're going to be using federal funds. And we have 2 land acquisitions that are going to go through, we anticipate going through next year. These are through the Forest Legacy Program, which is a federal program that was actually started in 1990 by Senator Leahy. And it's meant to support forest conservation. So we have 2 projects coming up that are combined around 7.3 million. One is Worcester Woods 3, which is in Woodbury, Vermont. And it's going to be it's 2 parcels. One's a private land easement, will be for 3,500 acres. And then in addition to Buck Lake Wildlife Management Area for 300 acres. And then the Chattagee Forest Legacy Project, which is down south, which is going to conserve some critical wildlife habitat. Was a combination of fee simple and easement land. So those are 2 incredibly important conservation projects that are going to happen this year. So that you'll see in our budget, which we typically did not put those in the past.
Where is the,
Chattagee,
you said down south?
yeah. It's in two parcels in Reading, Stockbridge, Killington, and Bridgewater.
Not so south.
Not south enough.
South-ish,
Yeah.
south of us.
Yeah.
So that Chattagay that's forest land near the spine of the Greens, really.
Yeah, I think, and really if you got a map of it, it really is like infilling some of the conserved lands for connectivity. So these are really high priority conservation projects.
The Appalachian Trail goes through.
I'm gonna have to get it back. Which we can do.
Did you say how many acres?
Yeah, total, it's 5 parcels, 3 acquisitions, addition to state land portfolio, and 2 easements, 3,100 acres. So combined, these 2 are gonna bring out almost 7,000 acres of new land under conservation.
Wow.
Which is great.
Fully federally funded?
Well, there'll be some costs, there'll be some match associated with it. We work with partners that pull in that match. But
Nothing in the state budget?
no.
Okay.
Our state partner, and a lot of times, is Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and we'll go to them for funding for conservation projects.
Okay.
In the Worcester Woods 3, is any of that part of the former Ted Barnett Worcester Woods?
Shit, but
Off of Elmore Mountain Road, or this is over the hill that connects, it's mostly Woodbury,
yeah,
so it's probably not. That's referred to as Worcester Woods, but that may be Worcester Woods.
I can get you, this is the third of 3 projects here. The second one fell through for us, but this is the third. And I can get you a great map, and Becca has been behind this and knows the details of it. It's an exciting project. It will remain a working forest, which is important for our principals.
Mike?
So you mentioned that at least the Chattagee is important for connectivity. Is that sort of like among your top priorities when you're looking for where to do these acquisitions?
Yeah, we have, that's a lot of times what we're trying to do is build in infill and it's key connectivity add-on. Also any like critical habitat that we want to, I think is important, working lands. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why we have a steering committee that reviews all the applications that come in and prioritizes them.
Is there like a hierarchy or are they sort of like awarding points or is
Each
it that?
project is so different
Yeah.
and what they bring to the table. Some of them could be small, but has a high impact on for conservation value. Some of them are larger, some of them are small, maybe it's connectivity piece.
Yeah, it would just be, and we don't have to do it here today, but it would be interesting to sort of understand better how they're making those decisions because they're such sort of diverse pieces.
Sometimes it's even access, like sometimes you can't get to another conserved parcel. I would love for our conservation team to come in and talk to you about what their work. Forest Legacy is such a great program. We have, I don't know if you know, the America Beautiful Act that passed a couple of years ago at federal level that secured at least $90 million secure funding for land and water conservation funding, which includes Forest Legacy. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, $700 million for land conservation. So we're going to be hopefully taking advantage of those funds, and we've been working with partners to identify like all those opportunities out there. And sometimes you know them, but it's all about timing. So hopefully we'll be the recipients of some more. Vermont was the first Forest Legacy project in the nation back in early 90s.
I made a note to,
Conservation?
yeah,
That's big, really interesting.
Yeah. So this is, we're supposed to talk about our position shifts. And so we do have in our budget, a budget neutral position change in Vermont State Parks. 47 full-time staff, 450 seasonal staff that we bring on every year. We're proposing to go down 8 seasonal staff to bring on 4 permanent staff to really start to right size our staffing component for Vermont State Parks. New Hampshire, as an example, 100 full-time year-round, 100 seasonal. Bringing on 450 seasonals is huge recruitment, training, turnover during the year. It's a lot of demand on the current staff. In addition, the way our seasonal workforce is, you can only work 7 months out of the year. So now we'd like to begin to expand the season. And with this workforce, we're not able to. So by starting to sort of right size this, reducing our reliance on seasonals, we love to bring the seasonals in, but 450 is a lot, sort of changing the balance a little bit, help us extend the season, bring more revenue in, have more professional staff year round. So this proposal, it's really budget neutral, but it's that beginning of that shift to turn the tide on this.
Is there a timeline for more than just sort of 4 at a time or?
Yeah, we'll keep trickling in if it gets approved.
Well, I guess, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I would almost be it would be more encouraging to me if it was shifting more at a time rather than sort of like 8 for 4 and still 442, you know.
This is our first time doing this, so we're planting the seed on it, really.
remind us again of how many year-round,
47.
47, so it's almost a 10-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
400, some seasonal.
And we have 56 parks, so it's not even 1 per park. But you think like Grand Isle State Park, near high population area, we could extend that really easily timeline if we had people available to do that. Like in April, what are you doing on April 8th at about 3:40? It's the eclipse.
You're not here.
And we can't bring staff on because then we won't be able to keep them on for the full operating season. So it's a reality of the system. So I think the next slide sort of talk about some things that are happening for us. I think we mentioned it's the 100th anniversary of Vermont State Parks. Who knows what the first state park was?
Yellowstone. State park, not national park. Pardon me. Sorry, everyone watching at home.
I know the answer, am I allowed to answer? It's in Rhode Island.
The first Vermont state.
It's Mount Philo, 1924. We're going to be kicking it off, a year-long celebration, February 15th here at the State House, the Cedar Creek Room. I will send you an invitation. It'll be 3:30 in the afternoon. We'll have a House resolution. It's all about telling stories. So we're going to be collecting stories over the year and really encouraging people to try Vermont by visiting a Vermont State Park. So we'll have events and swag and a whole bunch of stuff all year round.
What year was Mount Philo?
1924.
My God, we were slow today. Lunch, that's the problem.
Out there, no.
There's a reason I'm cutting logs for living.
We also just this past year did a recognizing 100 years. We did a parks modernization study. Sort of looked at like how do we become more efficient? Where should we be going in the future? And the results were 4 buckets of areas. One was staffing that we talked about. Part of that staffing bucket is also thinking about housing because we're bringing a lot of people in, need to get more RV hookups, putting some tiny houses in Groton. Another bucket is funding. What are opportunities to be more diversified in our funding source? And we're looking at things like how do we be more dynamic with our pricing? Right now, our prices go through rulemaking. We'd like to be dynamic, like, hey, it's midweek. There's nobody in the campsites. Maybe we need to lower the prices. So we're hoping to move something like that. Kiosks, like we talked about. So just that whole strategy on like how do you raise funding? Another one is on climate resiliency and adaptation. You know, we had several parks that were hit hard with the flood. How do we build them to be more resilient? How do we reduce our own carbon footprint with our operations of state parks? EV charging stations at state parks, so a whole bucket of ideas around that. And then the last one is diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we welcome everybody to Vermont State Parks? How do we welcome new Vermonters? How do we make sure they're accessible, even for language or trails? So a whole bucket just around inclusivity and diversity. So we'll be working on that over the next several years. The first thing we're doing is start to level those positions. We'll talk about dynamic pricing and a whole bunch of stuff coming up. You're going to hear about the Vermont Forest Future Roadmap next week. We're coming in. We did deliver that report to you a little bit late, but I think it came in last week. We're excited. It was a long journey over a year to get this done. We met with over 100 stakeholders. We had a fantastic 22-member advisory panel. We now have a framework built on 5 pillars that's meant to support the forest product sector and the greater forest economy. You've heard at a hearing how difficult the forest product sector is right now, the challenges it's faced. This will hopefully help put the wind in their tails to move them forward. But you can't look at one part of it. Our 5 pillars that set this up really start with forest management and land use, making sure we maintain a working land base, looking at the business environment and conditions and how do we support businesses, climate adaptation. You've heard like the challenges this summer were research, innovation, and technology, like really pushing like what's next, which means you got to take risk and maybe bring in some patient capital. Social licensing. I mean, I know I'm hearing it, just not appreciation or understanding that forest management is a tool to help us support healthy, resilient forests going forward and climate smart forest products. And then reimagining what the Vermont forest communities look like in the future. Strong opportunity for relationship with recreation partners. So we have 30 action strategies built out to support this sector going forward. And I'll share more with you on that, but I'm going to be sunsetting the advisory panel and sunrising an implementation committee that we're going to really, we can't let this die, right? That's what happens. Reports come out and we really want to like stick with it, to bring on a steering committee and then really sprint at work groups that take like sprint projects on like, let's dig into workforce. Let's dig into this. Cause it's 30 actions, but it's still pretty high level. So more on that. We like to plan. So we have Move Forward Vermont Together, designing our outdoor recreation future. This is a planning effort really designed around thinking about Vermont outdoor recreation economy how we grow it, and also how do we sustain what we have? This the whole stewardship of our trails and all of our trail recreation assets. They're in working groups now. Surveys are going out now. Hopefully by next fall, we'll really have another roadmap that identifies like where should we be investing? What partners should we be leveraging? So you're going to hear more about this coming up next week. Sounds like you have like a recreation focus coming up with the outdoor rec bill. July storm recovery, we as a department were hit like many others because we managed lands, and early on it was like response. We had several parks, Camp Plymouth, Jamaica State Park. We had campers in a flood, and so it was public safety at first, getting everybody out and safe. And now it's recovery. We had $2.4 million in damages to our state lands that we oversee. Camp Plymouth remained closed all year long, just from the damages. Our road and trail networks were hit. We're working with FEMA now. We have over 100 projects to just tend to for recovery work. I will say, we have been investing quite a bit on our road networks to improve them to be more resilient and protect water quality going forward. Those areas that we did the work on were fine. So it's just really a testament to putting those BMPs in and how they really withstood this event, which is great.
Is, sorry for not knowing this, but is the rail trail, is that you guys or is that AOT? Who is-
AOT does do that, which honestly really grateful because they were able to get that back up pretty quickly. We did have to, and they helped. AOT was fantastic for us because we had the trail in Quechee State Park, got hammered, and they just came in with 60 like dump loads of debris they brought out for us. Like, we don't have nearly that capacity that they just came in and were fantastic. And Camp Plymouth, they came in and helped us out a lot too.
Over a weekend.
Yeah.
They did it over a weekend.
I mean, it was happening like we were like getting ready for like, it's a big tourist area. We want to get everything opened again. And we have little contracts, and they were just like, bam, it was great.
You manage the wildlife management areas?
No, that's Fish and Wildlife, but I shouldn't say completely no, because we do have an MOU with them, and we support the forest management work in WMAs, and we work with them all the time on our state lands management. And we look at state lands management at an agency perspective, and we have teams from across the agency that come together, that if an ecologist, a forester, a recreation specialist, wildlife biologist, fishery, watershed, all come together and plan for and manage our state lands collaboratively. So it's a model, like we probably the best in the nation, really, on how we manage our state lands. Just a really interdisciplinary, professional approach. It takes a while to do it with a lot of voices. It's good work. And then the last one, just this is mainly when you're in the appropriations committee, the pressure's on us, but we talked about how small a business office is. We are moving through an additional $8 million of one-time funds, from like VORAC funds to federal funds, with really no additional capacity, just kind of sharing like this is the reality. Like, we're happy to move it, but it does, there's a little bit of grace needed because we can't move as quick because we have a lot of stuff coming at us. And it's a big demand on the team. Is that the last slide?
Well,
Then
the
you get
next
into,
slides are
really the,
our budget development.
really the budget development. Yeah.
This is for Jay.
So that's FPR. We got a fantastic team.
I'm happy to walk through these or not. It's our five appropriations. Okay.
I think you've put all the work into.
Happy to.
Yeah.
So this is our administration appropriation, total budget of just over 3 million. Just a small portion of it is specially funded, and that special fund is Park Special Fund business office staff. Kind of straightforward. The next is our forestry appropriation. There's a lot on this one. I don't want to walk through it line by line, but I can just going to use some high level strokes. Some of the interesting things on here that might stand out is the 207,000 in general fund other personal services, and that is our reclassification of our forestry staff from last year. And then there's also in the federal side, in the other personal services, until we are able to add positions into our budgeting system, you can't add those salaries to a salary line item. So those are actually new federal staff that we have, and as of FY20 and that came on board in FY24. Any questions on this one? There's a lot to, this one's kind of all over the place. So before I move on,
So the overall, what we're looking at here,
we're looking at just about 10.6 million.
and that was out of a total of 47.
47.
Grand total, right?
That's correct. So now this is state parks. Again, there's only $600,000 that's budgeted to general fund for parks. The rest of it is the state park special fund. And here in the other personal services, that's the movement basically between temporary employees and the new full-time staff. So the temporary employees line without that would have been close to 500,000. That makes sense.
The state parks funds, then they don't have to leave the FPR, they get to stay there, or do they have to go through the general fund and then come back?
They don't have to go through the general fund. However, we have to have authority to spend on it. So it has its own bank account, if you will, but it requires authority to spend. This is 18.7. And the last, well, there's one more. This is lands administration. Trying to think if there's anything to highlight here. So I was mentioning the Lands and Water Conservation Fund grants. You can see that in the federal line, and of course also the 7.3, and that's the land acquisitions in federal.
Yeah, no one-time funds or
Nothing shiny and new, unfortunately.
a lot of absorbing.
Yes.
Does your budgeting process kick off at a certain time of year every year, and then you know when that's going, when is that? When do you actually start working on it, or are you always working on it? You know,
Monitoring and managing it to some degree, yes, but there is a budget process that kicks off like right around September 1st.
okay.
Where we get materials and instructions, the governor's recommended increase, decrease, whatever it might be.
This year, the recommend was 3%, which means you're absorbing a lot because healthcare alone was 15% increase. So it's just trying to figure out what you're going to do. Luckily, we are getting a little bit more federal funds right now to help absorb some of it. But there was you have to cut.
As I was mentioning, the 753,000 that we have an increase in for benefits costs, that is more than 3%.
Right, yeah.
So that in itself, because yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
if you're going to keep the total to that 3. Does the move towards remote work make it easier to bring on 4 new full-time staff members? Would you have had a problem finding a place for people to work in the past? Or are they going to be coming into?
Well, they'll need to be able to be at park sites probably all summer long.
Sites, okay, right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But the ability to remote work is very attractive too, as opposed to having to go to the office all the time. But there is a counter to that too, is that we actually in the department are really working hard to try and make sure we're maintaining social capital, especially like with new staff coming on board. They don't necessarily know everybody. So we make a conscious effort of really trying to build that capital amongst our coworkers. But it is a benefit as well. So it's that balance.
What does that look like for somebody, what used to be a temporary position, they'd be on site at the park all summer. Now it's going to be full-time. They're still on site at the park all summer. What does the rest of their position look like?
Yeah, so the rest of it will be, you would think like they could help with add assistance to the recruitment process. They would help with lift up the training. They would help. There's always after every season, sort of like an after action, like what happened, new policies come into place, new safety procedures come into place. So they become part of that team that really helps overall operations, which is huge because this seems like, it's like the end of the season, everyone at State Park's like, just like takes a break for like, and then they got to get back into like, you start rebooting again to get ready.
We're in the reboot phase right now.
Yeah.
They're starting to build back up right now for the next season.
And there's just additional administrative stuff that happens all the time. You know, state parks is like a business within state government, and it doesn't quite fit great. Like, right? Imagine like the hiring process has got to be a certain way. It's not that nimble. Purchasing, not that nimble. We just got told that we have to change our hiring process, which takes a lot more time for our staff. And when you have 450 staff coming on, that's additional responsibilities on our current team. So that's what they'll be doing.
Part of what you'll be trying to figure out is whether you can make it work with 4 fewer employees in the summer, right? If
Yes.
you're losing 4 people during the summer, so. Okay, John.
Well, how are state parks open in winter and are they still?
So it's they're open. They're always open.
Yeah.
They're not staffed. So anyone can go camp at a park, go to lean-to and camp. They're open. The gate may not be open. You have to walk in, but we don't have any. It's not the operating season. We're providing services.
The trails are open.
Public land. Yours.
And so in mud season, it's just really a respect thing if people.
Yes.
use them?
It's resource protection when we're closed down in mud season, which is when the eclipse is probably happening, is during mud season. So we're really working behind this. And they're talking between 50,000 to 250,000 people coming to Vermont for the eclipse. In April, could be snow, maybe snow high, mud low, who knows? Could be fire season. And just really trying to get the messaging out and direct people. Yeah. Could be cloudy.
Probably.
Don't say that. It's true though.
People here anyway.
It'll still get dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this one's for 14.6. In the last appropriation, we had no changes. That said, this one also was allowed a 3% increase, but we used that 3% increase that you would see here to help support the other appropriations and some of that upward pressure.
This is our Forest and Parks access roads. Our whole state forest and parks for FPR is about 180,000 acres, and we have a road network for public access, for forest management. And so it's $229,000 to help us maintain those roads. It's not, yeah.
Do you guys maintain that yourself or is that contracted out?
We contract out a lot of that work. It's mostly contracted out. But even the mowing's now Parks has mowers for the lawn, but like for our forest network, road network, the mowing, the grading, we are very fortunate to have clean water funds to do those major upgrades of culverts and water bars. But the general maintenance is this pot of money.
And I didn't see your new boat. Is that, did you have to pull something from, because you said there's no one-time funds. Did that come out of special funds?
It's coming out of park special funds. Yeah, and we feel like we have enough to do it this year. You know, that's where we can find the fund to do it, and we know we need it. So we're doing it.
2 questions. One is just, so you were contracting for the boat service for the last.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Where would that contracting, was that also coming out of special fund or was that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming out of special funds.
And then the Forest Future Roadmap was funded with a one-time appropriation. And does that continue to fund an implementation process? So what does that look like?
We're gonna absorb it. You know, ideally, it'd be great to have some funding to be able to pass out to partners to help us lift this up. But we feel strongly enough that we need to maintain this. So we're gonna try and absorb it with existing staff. I just don't want to let it die.
And then how about the Move Forward Vermont Together? Was that tied to any funding?
We have funding for that now. Yes, we got some grant money. But then one of the main things of that as well is to identify really what kind of funding's needed to be invested. Like we've had these great one-time funding for VOREC, $2 $5 million investments. What is sustainable source that we need sort of going forward? And we don't really know, not only for outdoor recreation economic investments, but for the stewardship component. I hope that this planning effort and there's a proposed economic development can kind of help us figure that out going forward.
Yeah, sounds like a outdoor recreation economic impact study is an important piece of that.
It will help us, particularly that is meant to dial into like what's happening at a smaller scale, like what's happening at the county level. So we can start to really think about where investments need to go.
John,
You rent out Bailey bridges to loggers, don't you?
Yes,
How does that work? If you make any money, do you try to?
goes right back into building more. We have a funding that we're just actually building quite a bit right now, steel bridges and wooden bridges. And then we give some to the Natural Resource Conservation District so they can loan some out. Yeah, investing a lot in skidder bridges.
let's take one more question. Jed?
And this is spurred by, I took the luxury this fall of reading Timothy Egan's The Big Burn, which was a history of the 1910 forest fires in the Lola Forest west of Missoula and Coeur d'Alene area. They were catastrophic this day, the most devastating. But last year we passed a bill which gave you the authority to the moratorium on burning, which we had some drought in May, but then it became the rainiest. There was
But we had a lot of
never,
smoke coming from the north, right?
Mhm.
we did, but any activity, fire, has that impacted your budget at all?
Well, we took the opportunity with some vacancies to reorganize. The way we were recognizing that we really need to staff up and get the right expertise for these positions, so we're prepared for the future. Before, we used to have 2 people dedicated, well, 5 people dedicated about 25% to fire, but also forest health, which were really 2 separate expertise. We now have 3 people full-time dedicated to the wildland fire program, and they're working on bolstering that program. Everything from monitoring the fire dangers we currently do, lifting up a training program, and trying to recruit more volunteers who can respond if needed, trying to get geared up. So if we do have a fire that we bring people in, we have to have equipment to give them. So trying to build that out. So we are shifting to invest in preparation and response. And we'll be meeting with, we meet with Vermont Emergency Management and fire safety. So we recognize the need, we're doing it within existing resources.
All right, John.
Just quickly, they're hired a climate change forester at one point. And is that position vacant or did you?
Yes, we had our new hire start
Wow.
last
Monday,
this Monday.
this Monday.
Monday. Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled. Yes, so we have a climate forester again, Al Freeman, Dr. Al Freeman. So we'd love for you to meet her. She's fantastic. It's great that we needed it. This was originally, again, we're funding it with grant money. We're going after it because we know it's important, but we felt strongly that we need the science behind decision making, both on mitigation and adaptation. So we're thrilled. And we're hiring for an invasive species person now too,
Wow.
dedicated on invasives.
Is that,
Plants,
have you had that before?
no,
Nice.
grant money, but that's what we need. We need to be thinking like that.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you next week a couple times probably.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a
Thank you
good
very much.
weekend.
Well said.